Welcome back, everybody, for our afternoon session of Global CISO Forum. With me is a good friend of mine, Heath Renfrow. He's the CISO and Managing Director of Disaster Recovery Services at Conversant Group. He's widely regarded as one of the world's leading cybersecurity experts. He's got over 20 years of experience in cybersecurity, including with the DoD. Mr. Renfrow was the CISO at the U.S. Army Installation and Management Command and the first CISO for the U.S. Army Healthcare. Today we welcome him as he speaks on learn from others' mistakes, notes from the front lines of incident response and disaster recovery. Welcome, Heath. Thank you.
Well, Amber, thank you. Glad to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday. Glad to see some folks stuck around to see the last presentation of the day. Sadly, we weren't all able to get in person, which is what I was looking forward to this year, but that seems to be the trend. So hopefully next year that won't be the case and can meet everybody face to face. So the topic is learn from others' mistakes, notes from the front lines and incident response and disaster recovery, and we'll kind of just jump right into this and be considerate of everybody's time. And I got a lot to talk about. So Amber did a good introduction. So I'm the CISO for Conversant Group and actually the managing partner for Phoenix 24, which is our disaster recovery side of the house. But I've been with Conversant Group for a little bit over a year. Before I came here, I was at the Crypsis Group, which is now Unit 42, part of Palo Alto Networks. They were acquired back in September of last year, and I decided to leave the Crypsis Group and come over to Conversant Group, and it was a great decision, and Crypsis has done a great job, and so I have a great relationship with them. But at the Crypsis Group, I was the executive sponsor involved with a little over 100,000, that's too many, 1,000 breach responses, and CISO for a number of organizations within the Department of Defense, and active duty Navy for 9 years is where I kind of cut my teeth into the security space, information assurance side of the house. So great stuff. So here's the latest ransomware prediction. In fact, I was up till about 2 a.m. Central last night helping a client in New Mexico who had been hit by a ransomware attack, the Conti ransomware group. It's a healthcare organization. They're really targeting healthcare pretty heavily. So we were up in the middle of the night last night trying to get some operations back online for them. So it's never ending. But this prediction by John Chambers, who was the former CEO of Cisco Systems, kind of speaks to itself. 65,000 ransomware attacks this year alone I think, is a very conservative number for what we're seeing in the industry. The threat actors kind of took a vacation in August, specifically around the pipeline ransomware attack. They started getting a lot of headlines on them, a lot of focus on the ransomware group. So they kind of all went underground, cleaned up their dark websites, kind of disappeared, and some of them have renamed themselves and come up as a different threat actor underneath their different name, or some of them will just come back like they used to be, and they're back in full swing again. Holiday season is coming, and we expect in the industry, both on the data forensics side of the response house and disaster recovery side, that it's going to be a very busy next 3 or 4 months. Holidays seem to be prime time for these folks to really attack. The FBI is currently tracking a little over 100 ransomware gangs across the globe. And with ransomware as a service becoming the new trend, where these threat actors are offering their services for, if you need access into a person's environment or you need somebody to gain those credentials, you can actually subcontract it out. And they're piecing together all these capabilities. So ransomware as a service is really coming a long ways, where these groups, these ransomware gangs, have built the infrastructure and they take a cut of the pie if a ransom is paid. So they're very sophisticated. They even come down to the point where negotiations with threat actors in these situations with ransomware, requirements being put on to customers and having to pay in Bitcoin, that, most clients and victims sit there and hire a negotiator to negotiate with the threat actors. And they're quite successful with it because that's what the negotiators on the victim side do for a living. Threat actors did not do that. Well, they've started hiring negotiators. You can see the jobs postings on the dark side of the house, on the dark web, where they're looking for negotiators to be able to counter the victims' negotiators. So there's even one threat actor in the ransomware gang that's come out and said, if you hire a negotiator, we will destroy your decryption key and publicize all the data we took to your environment immediately. They don't even think twice about it. So they're getting a little nastier than they have been and continue to evolve, and we continue to adjust and try to stay ahead of them. So like I said, a total a little over 1,300 incidents from the front line. I'm going to share some old stories, some new, where victims go wrong and how they do it right, and some suggestions on how you can sit there and better implement and be prepared for these situations. So I had a healthcare ransomware, not the most recent one. We're still working through this, but we had a hospital out of California in the Los Angeles area that was hit by a ransomware attack. Immediately, first off, healthcare notoriously, and I came from a healthcare world, is undermanned when it comes to IT and security infrastructure. And this healthcare organization, that's about 110 beds total, this hospital, only had 2 total IT personnel and no outside support. So to say the least, when we got brought in and the data forensic incident response firm got brought in underneath breach counsel, they had not done, the client had not done a job of being able to contain the environment and be sure that the threat actor wasn't causing more damage in the environment. Now, the threat actor did, encrypt in the environment and exfil data out of the environment, but it was a lack of understanding and knowledge, a little ignorance, unfortunately, for the client, understanding just what they were facing and the adversary that they were facing, how complex and sophisticated these threat actors were. Right off the bat, they started just trying to rebuild, get operations back online. That's understandable. That is every client that I've ever worked with, and that I can say I'd probably be in that same situation. I'll be trying to sit there and get operations back online as soon as possible. But I am fortunate that I've been doing this a long time. I understand the proper procedures. They did not engage breach counsel. They did not engage data forensic incident response firm. They did not engage a disaster recovery firm like ourselves right off the bat. That was a challenge, especially in a healthcare organization. It's a lack of understanding that the threat actors just being in the environment is a possible violation of CCPA out of California, several privacy laws in multiple states within the country, and of course HIPAA being another one of those concerns for the healthcare organization that they need to take in consideration. That and reason data forensics is so important to make sure that not only do you understand when the threat actor got in the environment and how they got in the environment, what did they do when they were in the environment, what data did they touch, did they take any data out of the environment, what did they leave behind. So luckily we are able to get breach counsel involved. We get a great data forensics firm involved, and we started the rebuild process. But it is important to keep in mind in these situations, if you're ever facing it, that the rebuild and bringing operations back online cannot overrun the importance of getting that data forensics information to your DFIR firm. So we run in conjunction in this situation with the data forensics firm and make sure that all the data they need forensically was given to them and provided to them without us going in and compromising any of that data. So it's very important, even if you do not work in these situations with a disaster recovery firm, that your internal IT or external IT supporter that you might have does not compromise that data forensic information. We are very fortunate in this situation that the client was running around with their head on fire just trying to get their EMR system back online, that they hadn't really focused on trying to bring systems back online in-house and started the rebuild process from backups. And they did have some backups, which is a positive note. That was not corrupted or deleted, which is very unusual for threat actors, but it was the particular way they did backups. It was a positive for them. So they did do a lot of things right initially with their side of the house, but they didn't corrupt that data, so that was huge. Not understanding the severity of attack, it was probably one of the biggest downfalls of this organization, unfortunately, in this client in the situation. They had no clue, first off, how many systems they had in their environment. And that's one of the things I like to stress, not only as a CISO or in any type of conversation I have with anybody who's trying to mature the organization, is asset management is such a key component of having a sound cybersecurity program. 9 out of 10 times when we walk into an environment in my career with the Crypsis group, or even with my current group, a conversion group in Phoenix 24, when we walk in and go, okay, what are your total number of assets? It's a ballpark that's been given, and sometimes that ballpark is far less than what it really is, or is far too many, and you're not really understanding the scope of the infrastructure and work you need to try to tackle and get back online and capture forensics from, because there's just not an accurate count of what the total systems, and it hasn't been checked in a long time. So total systems affected is difficult. Data exfilled. the client did not understand that these threat actors, not only were they in the environment and deployed a malware and encrypted their devices, they didn't fully grasp the concept that it was hands-on keyboard in the environment, that these threat actors didn't just drop a malware in there and spread it and then that was it. They didn't understand the complexity of these threat actors and how they get into the environment, how they move laterally, how they touch data, how they snoop around for a long time, from up to 120 days, 180 days. Sometimes these threat actors are in the environment before they actually pop off the encryption and then move out of the environment after they take in and exfil the data. So the data exfiltration was a very eye-opening situation for the CEO of the hospital, as you can imagine, because of the ramifications from privacy laws being violated and, of course, HIPAA. So being able to make sure forensics is done correctly to be able to understand that that data is taken is so critical. Entry point, originally they wanted to just start rebuilding this client, and it's a failure for anybody in these situations that just starts to rebuild without understanding how did the threat actor get in the environment. That's one of the first things I would want to know. Rebuilding my systems and getting operations back online is one thing, but how do I prevent this from happening again? What is the flaw that I'm facing? And what accounts were used? You see a lot of group accounts in these situations, not tied to a specific administrator, one of their second accounts with multi-factor authentication in place. It is a group account that everybody's using. It's usually a simple password, and these threat actors are able to sit there and scrape that information using a tool called Mimikatz when they do get on into a system, and they're able to scrape those credentials, and then they start using that same account to be able to get through all your systems. So that's a healthcare ransomware. We'll jump to the next one. I'm a Texan. I have a tendency to talk a lot, so I'm going to try to be considerate of everybody's time and not run my mouth too much. Hopefully, I don't sound too Texan today. The next one was a manufacturing firm that we got called in to. It's a great story because what we see, I see a lot of these cases come through my door, merger and acquisitions. It's a challenge, and I understand that, but they're not done right for the most part. I see that I left the healthcare slide on here. That's because I was copy and pasting. I apologize about that. But merger and acquisition situation where this manufacturing firm had bought another smaller manufacturing company, but they had not revamped the acquisition's IT and security solutions. So immediately, within 2 weeks of this company being acquired, it is hit by a ransom. And now the parent company is trying to sit there and figure out, first off, they don't know the infrastructure. They don't know any of the endpoint solutions. They don't know the number of servers. They don't know the number of endpoints. They have no insight to anything. And they just sent some of their local IT folks on site to start rebuild before engaging a DFIR firm. That was a huge mistake in that situation because they got in there and realized just how devastating a ransom can be on the environment. You got no domain controllers. You have nothing really to feed off of, and these servers are completely encrypted. They didn't know local admin passwords, group admin. They had no access to their environment whatsoever. And started building to the data forensic firm, being able to come into that environment before the rebuild was going to be a disaster. Luckily, we got engaged from a disaster recovery standpoint before breach counsel and the data forensic firm was engaged, which is more. It happens a lot more than would you think, because clients just want to get back online, so they call us first, and then my group and my guys reach out to breach counsels that we have great relationships with, and we bring the breach counsel in, get underneath attorney-client privilege, and go ahead and engage a data forensics incident response firm that we have a great relationship with, and we got great relationships with pretty much all the firms within the United States and globally, so it really helps out a lot. The most surprising situation out of this manufacturing ransom was it wasn't one of the more sophisticated groups that were out there. It was one of the smaller groups, and the ransom was, in my opinion, not that expensive. It came to about 2 Bitcoins, but at the time the Bitcoin was running about $33,000 per Bitcoin, so it was about $66,000. This wasn't a mistake, and I don't blame the client for not doing this, but they spent, and the insurance probably paid total to get all the systems back online, the data forensic and the breach counsel, a little over $250,000. In this situation, and it took about a week and a half to get operations back online. A lot of clients in these situations, if they're facing a ransom, they do pay the ransom because they're able to get their operations back online. Yes, it's a risk. Maybe the decryption keys aren't being provided. Now, the Conti ransomware group, they're ruthless. And a lot of times they do not provide the keys. About 8 out of 10 times though, I've been in these engagements, when the ransom's paid, the decryption keys are provided and the data that was taken from the environment is provided back. So e-discovery can occur and you can sit there and understand what breach notifications you need to send out. But overall, this manufacturing firm would have probably been able to get up and operational quicker had they gone ahead and paid. They chose not to as a company from ethical reasons, and I completely understand that, and that works for me. But the thing that was very surprising to me is when we debriefed them on this situation, we emphasized that they needed to change the process for their merger and acquisition. They needed to gut the acquisition immediately and get their own security solutions and IT infrastructure in place. They said that was an idea, but at that time they were not going to pursue that as something they would consider in the future. So that was very, very eye-opening across the board. And I would not be surprised if we see that firm again somewhere in the future where another acquisition has been hit with an attack like this. And the parent company is spending a ton of money to be able to sit there and get operations back online. That amount of money, that was almost all out of this manufacturing parent's company's pocket because their deductible was $200,000 for their cyber insurance. So insurance really only covered $50,000. So it's important to understand your cyber insurance, what your deductible is, and long term, what's the most cost-effective way to get business back up and operational, and to minimize damage from a reputation standpoint. Law firms are huge targets. We are constantly seeing law firms come across the board. Probably the biggest one we saw over the last 2 years was a law firm at New York City who was represented Madonna and Lady Gaga and at the time President Trump, and had all those files and information. I mean, mount those terabytes after terabytes of data taken from their environment, and they were encrypted. Law firms are they're rich in data and they're rich in sensitive information. And notoriously, law firms have a soft underbelly. Security is maturing in the law firm industry, but a lot of times it's just forgotten and just keep IT operations up and running, and the manpower is not there to fully support the operations you need for these law firms. So they're easily accessible, no multi-factor authentication, no training from cyber awareness for the personnel that are there because they're lawyers. So who's going to waste a lawyer's time to do cyber awareness training? So they should be billing hourly and making money for the firm. So I click on a phishing email, and from there, everything just spirals out of control. This particular law firm was very interesting, though. Though they did the containment correctly right off the bat. The thing that was most disturbing was they did started to rebuild prior to engaging the breach counsel. We came in right at that moment, reached the breach counsel, and be able to sit there and get a data forensic firm involved. With this particular client, though, they had an MDR, somebody managed detection response solution in place, and had a firm watching their environment. The firm did alert, but they labeled it a false positive, and these threat actors were able to sit there and actually go disable the endpoint solution for that MDR. That did not provide, there was no alerts put into the environment. So the MDR in that situation had the notice, did see the environment, but they weren't able to shut it down before the encryption took place, and they never notified the client. We were able to look at those logs and look at that data and see that yes, there were alerts, but they were marked negative. They were marked false positives by the provider at that time. The thing that was most disturbing was to find out that this provider's MDR endpoint solution could be disabled. There was no other key that would be needed, secret key to be put in place to be able to actually disable it. So very disturbing on that side of the house. The interesting case about this was the law firm had a lot of security flaws. Shared group accounts, administrative accounts, no network segmentation, backups were not done correctly and isolated. They have a lot of internal stuff, but it wasn't a phishing email that this came from. It was actually a 0-day with their in-house solar wind solution. That is the reason they were able to break into the environment and get through it. So threat actor didn't come through your normal ways, but they did take advantage of a 0-day and get into the environment and cause wreaked havoc into the environment. This particular law firm, the exfiltration was 250 gigabytes of data that was exfilled out of the environment, and with a solution provider that does mega drive upload out of New Zealand, which is a very popular upload site for these threat actors to upload data to be able to sit there and hold it for ransom and double blackmail. And the initial ransom was $10 million was the asking for it. There was a company brought in to do negotiations. They did significantly reduce those negotiations, but this law firm did decide to pay to get the decryption key because they're really, it was going to, the law office would have had to close its doors had we tried to just do a complete rebuild from scratch. It just wasn't going to be able to happen. Plus, they wanted to get the data back to be able to do e-discovery, find out what sensitive information was exposed to their clients and be able to notify their clients and try to save their reputation. So in the end, it was a business decision. I support that business decision, no matter if it's pay or don't pay. It's not my decision, and we did our best to rebuild their environment, decrypt it. I want, if you ever face a situation, you're facing your leadership, I don't want you to go into these situations going, we got the decryption key, we'll be back up tomorrow. It's just not how it works. You got tons of data, tons of storage that needs to be decrypted, and it takes a long time from every single document and file within those servers and those shared drives to decrypt. It is a long process. So if you ever face this, don't think it's going to be 48 hours and we're back up and operational and good to go. That's just not going to be the case. So critical first hours. I've kind of harped on some of the mistakes that these examples gave, but the first thing and foremost is containment. And just you need to shut everything down. I know that's going to hurt the business, but we need to shut down everything and really lock down the environment. A lot of the times these threat actors have left the environment. They've cleaned their trail. They've left. They're not interested in staying in the environment. But if you don't start communicating with them in a quick manner, they're going to sit there and start having issues with you, and they will sit there and start looking at doing a denial of service attack or coming back into the environment. So it's good to contain immediately what you can contain once you discovered the incident. I would say about 6 out of the 10 cases that I've worked in my career that the incident response plan, disaster recovery plan were non-existent. But if you do have that situation, obviously engage your IRP and DRP and sit there and start running through that. If you don't have an IRP or DRP, get one and then do tabletop exercises and make sure it's shored up. Build playbooks around ransomware playbooks and other type of attacks you might face. If you do have an IRP and DRP and you have not tested it recently, test it. I would suggest that doing your DRP tabletop to make it live also, just to make sure your backups are good. The Veeam backup solution, just so y'all know, y'all can Google this, Veeam backups being targeted by ransomware group. They have specifically had developers that have focused on the Veeam solution and how to wipe those solutions. And almost every environment that we've walked into that had a Veeam backup solution, those backups have been deleted and crushed. Has nothing to do with the product of Veeam. It's just the way it's being set up in a client's environment to be able to communicate to do those backups. So it's just something to take into consideration. It's a quick Google. You should be able to get the answers on that. And internal incident response team, you got to have that POCs in place, IRP plus retainers. Everybody's going to go, well, we got hit by a ransomware attack. We don't have access to our IRP or DRP because it's on our drives. Please print out your IRP and DRP. Have a physical copy of it. Old paper, old school. Just like healthcare organizations got to turn to when they've been hit by ransom. It's back to paper and pen. Have that ready to go. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of clients go, well, our IRP, we have one, but it's encrypted. So it doesn't work out very well. Engage breach counsel ASAP. That's step number one. Get your IRP, inform your leadership. Do not send emails. Do not send text messages. Phone calls only until you get underneath the attorney-client privilege with the breach counsel. You got to look at the long-term ramifications of this disaster that you're facing from a legality standpoint. So attorney-client privilege is critical. And that breach counsel, they're specifically trained to guide you through everything. They know how to take the right steps, data forensics, how to do it, how to do the disaster recovery. how to handle everything from the notification side, how to look at the long-term ramifications from if it's SEC or if it's HHS OCR or whatever it is. And then engage truly qualified and seasoned disaster recovery and restoration firms. It's not time to be cheap in these situations. You need somebody who knows what they're doing, they're good at it, they're there to take care of you because they do understand where you've been. They've been in the trenches, they fought this war for a long time, and they know how to execute, get the job done, get you back up and operational securely, collect the data that needs from a forensic standpoint, and move forward with your operations and put this bad incident behind you and hopefully not repeat it any time in the future. So don't wait to be a victim. I'm going to walk y'all through a few things. I see I'm doing okay on time. Reliable recovery. Snapshot your data. Leverage native storage and virtual infrastructure point-in-time recovery. It's incredibly important. Backups. These are the most valuable things a threat actor will go after in your environment before they do anything. They're not going to go snooping through files, share files. They're going to have folks that eventually get to that, but they're going to make their way through the network, find out where your backups are, gain access to the backups, and then they're going to wait. And then they're going to do all the reconnaissance, find all the sensitive information, start exfilling the data out of the environment, get all their payloads around where they need to get their payloads to be able to execute. And right before they execute that payload, they're going to delete all your backups. They're going to destroy them, or they're going to encrypt them. Depends on, they might just do both. They might encrypt the backups and destroy them. You never know what you're going to get. But they know backups are number one reason they do not get paid. So it is the most valuable target in your environment, and they will sit there and go after them. And there'll be some suggestions on how to sit there and delimit that. So unnecessary administrative shares. My first thing is, if you have an environment you're using group admin, get rid of it immediately. You need to be able to do administrative access with administrative accounts that are assigned to individuals. Stop using the group accounts, get rid of them. Make them go away. There's such a 9 out of 10 of our cases that I've worked in my career, it is the administrative shares that are being used. Disable Active Directory integrated access to the data. That is how the threat actors like to get into it, specifically around Veeam is one of the main ways they get into the environment. So it's important to have that kind of segmentation in the environment. Do not integrate Active Directory like I just saw. Long phrase passwords. We've all seen the NIST and NSA's recommendations around passwords. Don't change them. Complexity can just be a long passphrase with 15 characters, and then enable multi-factor authentication. I know I'm talking to a lot of security folks on here, and you're probably going, well, we've heard MFA, everybody should have an MFA. Well, everybody does not have an MFA. Okay, I would be out of a business, which I don't mind being out of this business, truthfully. But my company would not be in the disaster recovery business had MFA been in place in the majority of our clients. Now, it's not a silver bullet, but it certainly mitigates the risk tremendously. Credential Manager, a tool like Thycotic, or there's some other great password vault solutions out there, really sit there and limit the risk into your environment. Yeah, Thycotic is a great tool. We love it at my company, and many of our clients, we sit there and provide that to them also. So not promoting them, it's just the tool that comes to mind for me right now. Leverage credential managers. I mean, if you don't have one, it should be one. It's an inexpensive, easy to use, and really reduces the risk to your infrastructure overall, not to have those passwords just running around everywhere. So that's great credential manager, and of course you can do MFA across the board. Harden the ingress. That's MFA. Ubiquitous external MFA, no backdoors, no exceptions. Okay. Oh, we have this one guy who needs access to OWA or needs access through an RDP. He's in Montana or something like that, but he still needs access, and he doesn't want to deal with MFA, or he's a senior person, doesn't feel like they need to do that. They want just a username and a 2-character password. You cannot have any exceptions to the implementation of multi-factor authentication. And you got to make sure MFA is deployed correctly. You cannot give your users, if you push Duo, for example, and you push out to your environment, you can't give the users an option to sign up or not sign up. immediately. It has to be pushed out. The only way you're going to gain access is you sign up and be able to sit there and register your phone and be able to sit there and do a multi-factor authentication. These threat actors, a lot of times, they're able to sit there and get into the environment, and they're able to become the in-between with that MFA not being pushed out to everybody. They'll find an unregistered account that has not completed that, and they'll intercept that SMS message and that setup and put their number in place of your employee's number, and then all of a sudden they're getting the MFA pushes and able to sit there and get in your environment. Seen it quite a few times in these situations, but I see it a lot in penetration tests of those situations where MFA has just not been properly deployed and it hasn't been focused on, and it causes a lot of issues because a lot of people go, oh, MFA's pushed, we pushed it out, we're good to go. Well, have you confirmed everybody signed up properly with it? And have you confirmed that there are no flaws in the environment? So it causes a lot of issues. Internal MFA across all the board, all systems all the time, including PowerShell, MMC, administrative shares, admin, $, etc. It's imperative to have that across the board. Firewalls, there's a lot of firewalls solutions out there, but you got to go with something that's a deep packet inspection. Your basic firewalls nowadays, they're not going to do this. A lot of our clients are able to prevent an alert on the network intrusion that was in their environment had they been using deep packet inspection. Good IPS, IDS, that's been around for a long time, but we still walk into clients that don't have it. Botnet blocking is critical. It's a lot of times these threat actors are able to sit there and use botnets and break down your security infrastructure and then pop through that direction. DNS reputation is another great tool. There's great tools out there. So NAC solution, it's inevitable. You got to have a great NAC solution out there. So keep those on the unauthorized devices from being attached to the network. Strengthen your workspace. Go for length on your passwords. Passphrase is the way to go. We're saying that again in here. Disable password caching on systems. Educate users to never reuse passwords. In today's NSA and NIST recommendations, you shouldn't be changing passwords anyways, but there are a lot of folks out there that they have their hypothetical reasons why they sit there and say, oh, I still need to have my folks change their passwords at least every 6 months. But educating your workforce, and we all know this, everybody on here knows this, educating your workforce, they're the greatest asset, but the weakest link a lot of the time. So education is key. Service accounts should be changed every 14 days. That's what we do with every organization I've been the CISO of over the last 10 years. So it is a great way to do it. It can be painful, but we're really going to sit there and make sure that we're reducing risk and limit your domain admins. I've worked into several clients, I mean, hundreds of clients, to be honest with you, that the domain admins are just spread everywhere. I mean, everybody has a domain admin account. It's astronomical and it's unheard of, and it just made it so easy for the threat actor. So if you hear me say TA at all, I abbreviate threat actor a lot. So if I say TA, that's what that means. Regular patching. Patching has been a nightmare since I broke into this industry 24 years ago. Patch management is difficult. It's hard to keep up with. Solutions are hard. Other things managed. Doing patching in a healthcare environment where reboots are required, it's almost impossible to get that scheduled. But it's so key and such an important element of a sound cybersecurity program. And this is what these threat actors take advantage of. We've all seen the 0 days that have come out the last 6 to 9 months, in the urgency to be able to get those patches pushed. And we walked into a lot of clients, unfortunately, that the knowledge that the patches were critical in 0 days and immediate updates weren't even known, because everybody in that organization, the IT organization, is just swamped doing other things, just trying to keep the lights on, and they're not able to keep up with the patching. So it's incredibly important to make patching one of your top priorities and harden your local security. Stronger endpoint controls, artificial intelligence-based AV, traditional AV. We'll talk a little bit more about AV versus EDR solutions out there. And application whitelist and blacklist and DNS reputation, we talked about that earlier. Local lapse, deploy lapse into your environment. If you haven't, it's critical. It is going to be recommended by any organization that might come in and help you in a ransomware event, from the data forensic incident response firm to disaster recovery firm, even from breach counsel. It's one of the first things they're going to push for an organization to do during the investigation part to reduce the risk of the threat actor is to do Microsoft Labs into the environment. BitLocker, local disk, encryption across the board, just in case you do get a device taken away. So email, 90% of breaches do start with email. That's actually a stated fact. And here's some recommendations on that across the board. I got about 10 minutes and I got a few more slides to get through. So I'm not going to read everything word for word. If y'all have any questions though, I haven't seen anything come in. This is the first year I'm not seeing any questions, but if you have any questions towards the end, I plan on, cutting back my time and be able to discuss that. I am the
Hey,
last.
Heath,
Yes.
you do have some questions. They've
Oh,
come
I
in.
do.
So
I
if
don't,
you,
I don't see,
yeah,
I don't see any in there. I'm sorry.
okay. Well, if you don't, and you get to the point where you want some, I will read them to you. But just to let you
Okay.
know,
I
you got it.
see, I see
Okay.
one question. Is that all?
No, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I am not, can you
yeah,
read? We'll catch up with those.
yeah. It's not in the
What-
chat. It's in the question section, not chat.
Okay, there it is. It's a question seconds. Okay. All right. I got permission to run my mouth. Okay, that's great. I tell you what, Amber, we'll just come back to that because I'm not actually seeing the questions themselves. So I'll come back to that here in a second. So maybe you can read those questions to me.
Will do.
Sounds good. All right. Next slide. Virtual private networks. Username and password got to go away, folks. RDP sessions got to go away. You got to sit there and start MFA across the board. Split versus full with your virtual private network. Always on, restricted to firm-owned devices only. If you have Citrix or Horizon, MFA, got to have it in place. Everybody thinks that because they're running a VDI environment, maybe they're secure and they can sit there and avoid a ransom. VDIs get locked down just like everything else when these ransomware attacks happen. So, and there is a soft underbelly a lot of times with Citrix deployments. If you ever do a penetration test and you have a Citrix deployment, you'll be surprised how easily it is for those pen testers to sit there and get into your Citrix environment and gain access. Citrix is a great product, but proper configuration and deployment of that product can be very challenging. Cloud applications, we see it all the time, but MFA, got to have it. NVM, Intune, restrict approval devices in place for that. Geo blocking is key across the board and close, cloud CAD solution or cloud asset security and MSSP and SOC sensors across the board. In today's IT world and security world, most people do not have the infrastructure or the money to sit there and hire enough internal folks to be able to manage every aspect of a security play. They buy a lot of tools. A lot of folks do. I call them tool happy, but they're personnel poor. They got a lot of tools, but not enough folks to manage those tools. So outsourcing is a key thing. It's something I've done throughout my career. It's something I will always consider in any situation I'm in. Is where can I get the best bang for my buck, but also reduce risk the best. And most of the time, that's outsourcing to organizations that actually specialize in it. They have the resources and not having to bring in-house manpower and compete with the rest of the industry on trying to keep them and understand the tools and how to better those tools and how to manage those tools. It can just be it can be tough. Know you've been hacked. SIM is great. I've seen about 9 out of 10 SIM deployments into environments. Most of the times they fail. The complexity and the need to be able to manage those is not understood completely when somebody purchases a SIM. Like, oh, we need a SIM, we need to do security. We had no idea how we're going to manage it, how we're going to look, what's false positives, not false positives, work through that information, be able to submit tickets, be able to do the investigation. At a minimal, depending on if you're a small organization, you probably need 2 or 3 people to be able to manage that. So it's important to have a SIM, but I would always push to have a managed SIM or an MDR in place, and that's managed detection and response, MDR. I think there was a question around that earlier. So log ingestion, IPS, IDS, log review, behavioral analysis. If you have an EDR solution like CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or Sentinel-1, all those logs can all feed into a central SIM, and you can have a managed MDR looking at that. So they're looking at the environment, they see the log alerts, they're going through and alerting on what's false and not false. And then they're that call that reaches out to you as a client, says, we see something suspicious, we've halted it in its tracks, we need you to help you investigate. So it's important to have that. Someone who has all the resources and eyes to really look at your environment properly is key. If you have it, you can build your own SOC inside your own environment, kudos to you. But if you can't and you need that level of security, don't just buy a SIEM if you know you cannot manage it properly. Look to outsource that. What you don't add, everything you can sit there and get added value. I mean, Office 365 logs could be pumped into a SIEM. There's a lot of capabilities out there, but like I said, being tool rich doesn't do you a lot of good. So tools are worthless without them being installed, configured, and monitored. So there's no reason to have all those tools. It looks good on paper. You get to tell your leadership, hey, we got the latest, greatest security solution. We have no idea how to manage it or have the folks to be able to sit there and actually look at it and get the value out of it, but we do have that security solution. Know your vulnerabilities, okay? Everybody's gonna have vulnerabilities. Know your risk. Do risk assessments. Look at a cybersecurity framework like the CIS 18 or the NIST cybersecurity framework. Start following it. Understand where your risks are. You're always gonna have risk. You're always gonna continue to address those risks and move forward with it. So review them regularly. You're always gonna have to go back to the drawing board. You should be able to take those risks, equate those risks to your board of directors, your senior leadership to address those risks from a financial standpoint, or get them to accept the risk. But constantly reviewing them, constantly looking at the landscape. Subscribe to all the magazines that are out there. Work with EC Council, look at the latest threat data. Go to APT 42 or Mandiant, or go to Strauss, or go to Unit 42 at Palo Alto, or CrowdStrike's threat reports that come out every year, or their blogs that come out that you can sit there and build IOCs, indicators of compromise, or indicators of attack, IOAs. So there's a lot of different things you can be looking at, constantly looking at your environment. Eliminate print servers and all other known service vulnerabilities in your environment. The print servers become interesting things recently. It's pretty self-explanatory through the rest of this. Block all unapproved remote access in the environment. SSL inspection, DNS reputation is key. Remove insecure tools from your environment. I put some cases on insecure tools because they've been in the news lately. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not slamming the vendor at all. If I had those tools, I'd remove them from the environment at this point in my own environment. Tabletop exercises, folks, they're so important. They're so important. And don't just do IT. It's great to do just IT and security together, understand how you're going to do those initial investigations and looking at things, but it's so important that you need to bring HR in. You got to bring your counsel for your tabletop exercises. You need to go ahead and have a breach counsel on retainer and pay them to be part of those tabletop exercises. Because when it hits the fan, folks, it is crazy and it's stressful and everybody's moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. But if you practice this and everybody understands what their role is and they understand what the breach counsel is going to guide them, the CEO understands, hey, we got to take these steps first before I can get my company back online, because if I don't do this, yeah, I get my company back online, but threat actor can come back in, reputation could be damaging, fines could be out the yin yang. There's a lot of other issues. Tabletop exercises, folks, drill them in, do them all the time. I do mine every 3 months in my organization. I've done that, over the last 10 years of my career. It's just that important. DR, disaster recovery drills. What do your backups look at? Are they as good as you really think they are? Have you ever recovered from those backups? Are they segmented? Are they put off from the rest of the environment where nobody else can touch them? Is there multi-factor authentication in place? Have you ever truly tested it and done a crossover just to be able to sit there and make sure it's going? Where is your DR going? Is it going to the cloud? And where are they located? Where's their data center? Is it in a safe location? Most hospitals that I've worked with, their disaster recovery, their data center is on premise, and then somewhere else on the facility is where they have their backup servers and their backup location within the same facility. And if they're in California, that's a big risk. Earthquakes are very common there. So why are they not outsourcing and putting their backups into a different location for their DR site outside of the state of California? So a lot of things to take into consideration when it comes to this. So DR doesn't just mean from a cyber attack, it can mean from a disaster, obviously, but something to take into consideration. This cybersecurity framework, the CIS 18, which used to be the CIS 20, is now the CIS 18. Just really start building your cybersecurity program to a cybersecurity framework and getting those fundamental things in place. Cyber insurance. I tell you what, I hate to say this, but 8 out of the 10 clients that we've been brought in, I've asked immediately, who's your cyber insurance provider? And everybody's like, yeah, we don't know. We're trying to figure that out. This is the IT folks and the security folks. Sometimes the CFO or the legal side of the house have purchased that insurance, but they never share that information. And they're not really familiar with it. They don't understand, does the cyber insurance have a cyber insurance panels? Do they have panels? Data forensic panels, breach counsel panels, communication panels, and who are on those panels? Do they have a incident response retainer in place with any of those folks? Most of the time, no. So there's a lot of scrambling in those situations, and yet they're down right now. But breach counsel is like, we need insurance, we need to know what your deductible is, and then we need to get approval from the insurance to hire this person, to hire themselves, breach counsel, to hire a disaster recovery firm, to hire a communications firm. We got to get all these approvals from the insurance company, and you don't know who your insurance is? And what does it take? That one manufacturing plant that I was talking about, they had a very nice $10 million cyber insurance policy. They were shocked to find they had a $200,000 deductible, though. It was a huge, huge shocker to them. With a merger and acquisition for something as small as this manufacturing plant was that they purchased. Standard coverage, understand if ransomware payments are paid. A lot of law firms use one centrally known insurance firm within the United States, and that insurance firm does not pay for ransoms. They'll pay for everything else, and they have pretty high deductibles. $500,000 on average is what the deductible is for the law industry on most of this cyber insurance company. But that cyber insurance company is not paying any of the ransom if you decide to pay. So if you paid a $1 million ransom and then you had a $500,000 deductible, you're immediately out $1.5 million. So it's very eye-opening. Cyber insurance, I would say, focus on it tremendously, but also be prepared. The cyber insurance field and companies, they're changing their tactics. They have been taken full advantage of by threat actors in their clients because they haven't had sound cybersecurity programs. So policies are increasing up to 40% more expensive. But these cyber insurance firms are actually hiring specialists to go in and look at their clients' environments and do risk assessments on their environments. Not just a Q&A, folks. Actually going in and testing. When's the last time you did a penetration test? We're going to run a vulnerability scan in your environment. We're going to run a vulnerability scan on your external environment. We're going to look at your environment from head to toe, understand the technology. When's the last time you did a risk assessment? Are you following it? Have you done a tabletop exercise? What are the minutes of the tabletop exercise? What were the results of it? It's going to get very much more difficult to get cyber insurance at a good price going forward because they have to pivot. It's just, it's a piggy bank to the threat actors and clients right now, for the most part. They're buying the cyber insurance as a cybersecurity program. We bought insurance, so if something happens, we got this insurance to pay for it. And they're not focusing on building the cybersecurity program out. So that is a huge concern with these cyber insurance companies. We work with them all the time. I got a great relationship with them. It's coming. It is already happening. It's only going to get worse. All right, Q&A. I wish I could see all the questions. I do not know why I can't, but
Well, here we go. Hope you're an auditory learner. In the healthcare ransomware, didn't they have a network performance monitor? It's really bad if you're having someone snoop in for half a year.
Well, they had a lot of technology in place, but these threat actors, when they get into your environment, they know how to mask themselves. You're not dealing with unsophisticated. They know what network traffic is supposed to look like, so they go in very low key. They're not with the data that was being exfilled out of the environment with small chunks. They had put different type of tools on different users' desktops and laptops, and were exfilling data out in little bitty chunks. They were zipping it up. so the firewalls didn't alert that these huge chunks of data were going out. This particular firewall setup was probably one of the most poorly set up firewalls we've seen through the years. So no, I mean, if you look at anything, you can Google this, you can look at Gartner's report on this, you can look at IBM's report from 2020 that's come out. CrowdStrike has a recent one, Mania just came out with one. The threat actors on average are in the environment, if you combine all of those analysis, about 180 days without being noticed. Even with today's solutions that we have out there from a security and IT perspective, these threat actors, they know what they're doing. They know what traffic is supposed to look like, and they make sure their movement in your environment matches what the traffic is supposed to look like, so they don't alert on it.
All right, what was the name of the scraping tool?
Mimikatz, M-I-M-I. I want to say C-A-T-S, but I think it's K-A-T-S, K-A-T-Z, sorry. It's an open source tool, probably make you cringe a little bit. Anybody can get a hold of it. It's kind of crazy. I think the next one is MDR company name or managed detection and response. I think I maybe answered that earlier. I think I'm able to read these now. Amber, is that the next one?
Yeah, and I answered that one. I typed in. So yeah, I'll stop button in. All you.
No. I don't know why this doesn't seem to work. I actually go back to it. I do not want.
Okay.
I cannot access it.
How reliable is this firewall to you? Untangle.
Actually, I have no knowledge of Untangle. I'm a big FortiGate firewall type of person, especially their deep packet inspection capabilities. So I tend to lean that way. I'm not familiar with that firewall, so I can't offer an opinion on it.
Fair enough. Do you recommend using more than one type of backup modality for backup in depth?
Yes, I absolutely do. We use 3 different backups just for my own organization. So we backup to backup to backup is always the way to go. And the segmentations there is just paranoid. We're paranoid, to say the least. We want to make sure that we can recover, but that would be highly recommended, but a lot of people can't afford that. But there are other solutions that I put in here to be able to sit there and minimize that risk.
All right. On VM backup specifically, in what location do you save backups the safest?
I tell you what, I will have to get to my network engineers on that one. I do not recall at the top of my head where we're putting those out. I'm a CISO. I don't get into nitty gritty of stuff. I let those guys tell me what they need to do with that. But I tell you what, I'll post my answer on LinkedIn to that question. So if you just add me on LinkedIn, you'll be able to see that response. I'll post it out there here probably before the end of the day.
Wow, thanks. Is there anything to watch out for when retaining a DFIR?
So data forensic incident response. Most of the DFIR firms are really good out there. I mean, even the small ones. I think if you have cyber insurance and you're pulling a data forensic firm off of the cyber insurance panel, they've been vetted. Obviously, they're on a panel because there's a price point that's been met with the cyber insurance wants to be charged, obviously, but they've been vetted. They're good at what they do. I mean, the best in the business are going to be Unit42, CrowdStrike, Mandiant, Straws, TracePoint, who just got bought by Booz Allen, and there's a number of those out there. And a lot of times, those big boys and girls, they're busy and they don't take new cases on, but they have partners underneath them that they'll refer you to. But I would go to my cyber insurance company. I would go at almost every cyber insurance company out there now has some kind of portal you can log into, and you can look at all your data forensic firms that are on there, communication, breach counsel, and I would start those relationships now. I would not wait until then. Do a no cost incident response retainer. It doesn't cost you anything, but you have that relationship with that data forensics firm already. Go ahead and do it. There's no cost to it. They'll welcome the relationship. Now, You can do a paid retainer and get higher priority if something happens, but obviously the no-cost retainer makes you familiar with that. Same thing with breach counsel. Get a retainer, have everything in place already so you can just call them up should something happen. And breach counsel doesn't always need to be part of ransomware. You get a business email compromise or a laptop with sensitive information has been stolen. It wasn't, data at rest wasn't in place. There's a lot of reasons you could need a breach counsel, but go to your cyber insurance, look at the panels they have available and start looking at those and researching those firms on there. But you really can't go wrong with anybody that's on the panel.
Okay, and what makes a good breach counsel?
Specializes in cybersecurity incidents. You can't just call up. So if you have an in-house legal counsel, for example, they're not the folks that you need to be running a cybersecurity incident response. The privacy laws that are involved, the process of it, understand what data forensics is, understand what the data needs to be pulled out. These breach counsels, a lot of them have CISSPs or some type of cybersecurity certification. They understand IT and they understand the cybersecurity landscape. They know these threat actors because they're battling them every single day. They know their tactics. They know what they're doing. They know how to sit there and make sure that they're gathering all the right data from a regulatory, compliance, privacy law, HIPAA, SEC, whatever regulations or future lawsuit possibilities, they have that information covered already. So you need to have somebody that specializes in this. And there's some great firms out there, Baker, for example, and Baker Hostetler, and I just kind of drew Mullins, and there's a ton of them out there. You can't go wrong. Just type in Google top 20 cyber security law firms, and you'll get the top 20 out there. But go to your panels. Once again, insurance panels. Just go on there. They'll have a list of breach counsels, and those have been vetted, and they're really good at what they do. Do not call your local law office in your town and say, hey, we had a cyber, we need to get an attorney-client privilege. They're not going to know how to properly do it, and it's not going to be as effective as it should be.
Okay, have you dealt with any APTs? Sorry, no.
Yes, I have. A lot. Not just dealt with ransomware attacks, but I've done with a lot of APTs. And I didn't talk about APTs because you're dealing with a nation state, and the different things that we put in place as far as mitigating your risk, they're really going to sit there and go a long ways with these nation states. But a nation state, even within Department of Defense, I deal with the nation states all the time. They're persistent. They're good. They have unlimited resources. They take their time. They're sophisticated. We've seen those chain attacks over the last 2 years that have sit there and really helped, affected our infrastructure and across the globe. Those situations, the basic security protocols and procedures and following a framework that we discussed earlier and actually having a sound cybersecurity program will mitigate the risk of APTs. I would say that they're more sophisticated because they have a nation in the backing and the money behind it than even your ransomware gangs, but those guys are really sophisticated too. Dealt with China, North Korea, Iran. You can consider parts of the Russian side of the house good to go. I've even dealt with Israel at one point, even though they're our allies, but they're busy and also. So it's incredible. It's an interesting world, that's for sure. But they're interesting. The APTs, what they're in their environment for compared to ransomware, is very, very interesting to watch. It's all about reconnaissance and data stealing, and just every secret that you can get your hands on, they're going to take, and that's what they're really focused on. Though there are elements of the China's APT that's breaking off, and they're starting to look like they're focusing on ransomware now. So it's interesting. That's interesting, considering China's banned Bitcoin. So I don't really know how that's going to work out for them, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay, this is the last one. This is just a comment on service account password being changed every 14 days. It should be shared between 2 different units for the purpose of enforcing dual control.
Great statement.
Yeah, I guess that's not a question. So we are done.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody. I got one more slide. If anybody needs to ever get a hold of me or anything else like that, there's my email address. Feel free to email me anytime. Always glad to help in any way I can. answer any questions. And hit me up on LinkedIn or wherever else you need. I'd be glad to. Do I end this, Amber?
I'll do it. Sorry, you were cutting out a little, so I wasn't sure if you were still talking. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and I hope to see you next year in person in Atlanta for the Global CISO Forum. Have a great day.